Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, we are again with the new lecture, and the topic of the lecture is theoretical components in interpreter and translator training, as you can see here on the slide. Uh, in this topic, there are two key words that needs to be explained: theoretical components and training. So, what do we mean by theoretical components and training? And I start with the second. Training means education. Training means pedagogy in this context. Although training usually is defined in a way where very short period program, 1 day, 2 day, or 1 week program is called training, or maybe it can extend to 2 weeks or 3 weeks, not more than that. As for the theoretical components are concerned, components mean the elements that are needed for teaching translation courses or for teaching translation, for enhancing translation competence. So theoretical components means the strategies, the procedures, or maybe some theories that are required for preparing translators or interpreters. This talk has been is taken from, it is basically based on this chapter number 1, and the name of the chapter, as you can see, is this one: theoretical components in interpreter and translator training. But the name of the book is Basic Concepts and Models for Interpreter and Translator Training, written by Daniel Guile, and it has been very a key book in the area of translation pedagogy. And I always recommend my students to use this book whenever you need for the purpose of research, because the book is written by a person who has spent 30 years in the area of translation pedagogy and training. The chapter consists of these 10 points. As you can see, no need to read them out, but in this presentation I shall only talk about these 5 points: the role of training in interpreting and translation, the components of translation competence, the diversity of training requirements, the need for optimization in formal translator training, the process-oriented approach in translator training. I hope all the words are clear, because my talk and also whatever you see on the slides, everything is based on your primary understanding of these words. Although I shall be explaining these words, at the time when I discuss each point. The role of training in translation, the point here is, when we say what is this, the nature of translation. So we are before I say that, I think T with capital, as the writer has clarified, it stands for written translation and oral translation, interpretation, both. So the translation is not is not homogeneous activity. That means we say this is translation, because it has a very big spectrum. It's a wide variety of translation and interpretation conditions. There are full-time people, those who are called translators. There may be some employees who happen to speak one or more foreign languages, and then they are involved in translation activities. They are asked to translate, although their basic job is not translation or interpretation. In Pakistan, in Islamabad especially, we can compare this with what is being done under the name of translation in upper market, and versus highly qualified and experienced translators who are translating novels, who are translating literary books, who are translators highly very important technical and scientific books. So the spectrum is different. I think this picture can explain the point. I'm starting from my left side, and this is your left side as well. I'm starting from Jinnah, the founder of Pakistan, and Nelson Mandela is very famous uh, leader in the recent history, and Lee Kuan Yew, the Singaporean founder of the modern Singapore, and Hitler is very much notorious, and now the Trump is, there's no need to define Trump. What is he? All they are called human beings. So we can say all they are human beings but by their nature, by their contribution to the humanity, by their what they did to their countries is totally different. So just like that, translation is translating one page, translating one sentence is also called translator. But the Goethe, Goethe, the German philosopher and writer, was also basically a translator. And we should also know that Allama Iqbal also translated a few German and English poems into Urdu. Also, the big names in the history of literature, in the history of knowledge, we find big names, those who were basically those translated a lot of things, and by the virtue of their translation activity, they learned a lot, and that reflected in their original writing as well. So the point here is that the spectrum of translation is very long, and varieties, there are a lot of varieties. You can see a highly creative work, the translator, and those who are doing that, they need specialized information. Sometimes it becomes translation work becomes at level where rewriting into a target language becomes the norm, that you need to rewrite into the target language, that your understanding of the source language should be so excellent that you can rewrite it into the target language. But then there are business letters, small letters, are road signs are translated, they are also called translators. And then uh, directions for hotel guests, also translations. Information for tourists, small brochures for the tourist, and containing information, they are also translated. And see, smaller to the bigger, testimonials, documents. So when there are political speeches or legal texts, this, in the case of political speeches or legal texts, or even the literary text or the religious text, the responsibility is huge versus modest role. For example, if you are translating a menu for a cafeteria. So the point is that the spectrum of translation and translators work is diversified, and we the pedagogues or the future pedagogues, we the teachers, we should know the diversities, we should know the kinds, we should know the levels of work that is being done under this name, translation and interpretation. Also, the same point is continuing here. Educational top academic qualifications and the modest primary school, those who are working in the area of translation, there are people who are translating with PhD degrees, and others on the other side, they are doing with maybe under metric or the matriculation level. You can see examples in our para. And something is translated for a single person, or for the objective is just to give the basic meaning of the text and not. But there are texts that are translated for television, that are translated to be published, and that are meant for very learned people, those who have also critical understanding of the things. So the work of translation is it is diversified, as I said, I'm just repeating, and is different from different aspects. From the financial aspects also, there are people who are earning huge money for their work of translation, and there are other segment of the society or translators who are not who are not at that level. They are self-proclaimed translators, but with very low level of performance, highly qualified with excellent performance. They are bilinguals, just bilinguals. Those who know two languages, who engage in translation without any training versus well-trained translators. So all are called translators. All are called translators. This is the point that should be very clear in this section under the title of the role of training in translation. With this description, we can move on to the question of born or made. The question of are the translators, because keeping in view the roles and the spectrum of translation and interpretation work, we need to know the debate going on in the field of translation studies about whether the translator is born or made, is nurtured, or is nature. uh, the natural aptitudes are prerequisites to high quality translation or to simultaneous interpreting. Of course, these the natural quality, the aptitude, the abilities with which a translator is born are prerequisites, are needed for high quality translation or to simultaneous interpreting. Some reach top level performance through experience and self instruction. So there are people who by themselves, and they learn translation by trial and error method, and then they spend 20 years, 30 years in this area, and then they reach top level performance through experience and self instruction. Some encounter obstacles which halt their progression. Even they reach that level, but they have some gaps. They don't know certain areas of competence in the field of translation. So in this, they are encountered with obstacles, which of course stop them from further progression. Some experienced translators never manage to free themselves from the source language structure, and these of course things have been collected from the field. The author, because he has a long experience of practical translation training, he's done training in many countries from source language structure, and they also told that we are unable, although we have spent 20 years, but we are unable to get free to from the source language structure, or we always feel that we are following the source language structure, and that following source language structure is for the research purpose is a different story, but for the practical translation purpose is considered a weakness. So some reach a certain level of proficiency but do not know how to move up. There are examples where people, at their own, they started translating, and then they reach a certain level, but they after that they don't know how to move up to the next level. Some experienced conference interpreters feel they do not perform well in consecutive interpreting. This consecutive interpreting, I hope you all know, is by nature is very different from the simultaneous. And the problem they face is that they have not formal training in note taking techniques, because note taking techniques are so important in consecutive interpreting that those without training, without education, without degree or certificate in the area of translation, they find it very difficult. I have personal observation during one of a very high profile event. I can tell you, when I meet you in the classroom, only gifted people can hope to accede to these professions on their own without developing, although they can, of course, continue their progression, but they also develop serious bad habits, and they also make mistakes that will tarnish their professional performance for the rest of their careers. We are here talking about the question of born or made. Is the translation born, or is he or she made through education and training? uh, Field experience and self-instruction may involve much groping in the dark and learning by trial and error. Of course, when you don't have formal training, formal education for a certain thing, and you enter in the field, in the field of translation here in our case. And you have to, of course, pass through many phases, and you have to spend years to learn things in that area, in that field. We can conclude this discussion whether the translator is born or made with these four points. Of course, aptitude or the basic skills with which one person is born are very important, and especially in, we can say, two areas. One is simultaneous interpreting, because there's a research and they say the simultaneous interpreters, and not everyone can become a simultaneous interpreter. There are abilities, basic abilities, that are essential to become a simultaneous interpreters, like being outspoken, like feeling comfort when you meet people, talking to the people too much, like love for travel to other countries, and so on. The time is very important, because if one enters in the area of translation and translating without any formal training, he or she may have to spend 10 years, 15 years to learn things that can be learned in 1 year or 2 year. And of course, the education, with the education, proper education, your performance shall be different. And also, the performance is related to your education. So there are, there are points that should be kept in mind. Of course, the translation are born for certain categories, but most of the categories translators are made. This is the concluding remark that I can make here. Of course, the detailed discussion is in the book. Okay, what are the merits of training? After reaching this conclusion, we can quickly talk about the merits. Training, of course, the formal training, enhance performance to the full realization of potential. If you have potential, if you are born with aptitude to become simultaneous interpreter, formal training will, you know give you this, will cause full realization of your potential. This is number one. Formal training develop translation skills more rapidly. The time factor is very important here. Raise professional standards in the marketplace by selecting the best candidates at admission. When the best candidates are selected in the intake, at the admission time, and then they are given the training, of course, and after the training, when they go to the market, they will perform very well. Raise the social status of translators. The formal training raise the social status of translator. Uh, this point is very interesting. The social status of translators. Uh, in societies like us, of course, we are still struggling for the social status of translators, but where the people have distinguished between the mm, those who are translating just very small things, and those who are the literary translators, those who are translating the books, related scientific books or the literary books or the novels and so on. And there's a huge difference. So in this part, those who are translating uh, let's say the literary books or novels, they are given respect. They have very good social status in the society. So and through the training, when you become a professional with the degree, you know how to create a niche for yourself in the society, how to present yourself among in front of the people, because you have learned all this in an educational institution. So when you go to the market and you present yourself as a translator or translation researcher, uh, your language is different, your jargon is different, way of talking is different, and you know how to market your skills. So in this way, you enhance your status among among the people and in the society. Of course, by virtue of formal training, the students are introduced to the professional organizations, and also through the professional organization, they are exposed to the translation market as well. Interpreting schools usually have close links with the major national, international organizations and institutional clients. Of course, you can ask me a question when I meet you about this. Where do we stand in this point, in this context, where the international schools have close links with the major national international organization? Standardization of working methods, because the formal training tells you what are the standardized working ethics, working methods, and how to deal with the client, how to set your rate with the client, how to meet the deadline, and if you are not meeting the deadline, how to communicate with your client, and so on. I mean, there are a lot of things that can be said in this regard. You if you get formal training, you feel, very comfortable, because you belong to a genuine profession, and you have opportunities for research into interpreting and translation. In our case, of course, in MS Translation Studies, these opportunities, abundant opportunities in the area of interpreting and translation. And on the other hand, research uses the training environment, the classroom environment. Research in the area of pedagogy, translation pedagogy, uh, you know the data is here and there. Even what is happening in the classrooms is one kind of data that can be reflected, that should be observed, and that should be experiment. With this, finished point number one, and now we can move to point number two, the component, which is a very, very important part of this presentation. The components of translation competence. There are basic four components that have been discussed by this author, and I think they are basic, essential, and pivotal in the translation training, education, and pedagogy. What are those four components of translation competence? I shall quickly, move on to the next slide to tell you what are. Number one is the passive working language, knowledge of passive working language. I shall explain it after some time. And number two is active working language, knowledge, good command of active working language. So we are talking about two languages. Number one, uh, passive working language, and then active working language. The third component is sufficient knowledge of the themes and subject matters. Themes and subject matters. And number four, declarative and procedural knowledge about translation. Of course, four is divided into two parts, declarative and procedural. So we shall discuss them one by one. Good passive knowledge of passive working language. So we need to understand, what do we mean by passive. Passive means where you just get some information and understand, you don't need to perform. And if we want to explain it in a simple word, we can say your knowledge of the grammar, and reading skills should be very good, and writing to some extent, but basically your understanding, comprehension, and reading skills of that language should be excellent. So good passive knowledge of passive working languages, receiving, understanding the text, this is very important. Although you are not expected to speak that language fluently, but to certain level you speak that language, but you are very passive, but your knowledge is very deep, your knowledge of that language is very good. And knowledge is, of course, as levels lowest to top level, of course, scientific language register, international organizations, law, different aspects of the languages associated with these areas, organizations, science, technology, literature, music, so on. Literary translators, they they need more knowledge. Of course, they not only the meanings of the text, they need to understand the fine shades of rhetorical aspects of the figurative use of the language, and also the they should know the connotative associative meanings of each words and their shades, and they also should be very should be very well versed in the rhythm, music, images that are used in literary language. And in that they should also be aware of cultural facts, norms, trends, and atmosphere. So the good passive knowledge of the good passive working languages. Good command of active language, that is one point, I'm sorry, one point left here. When we say the passive language, we are talking about the source language. We are talking about the source language from which the translator is supposed to translate to the target language. But when we come to the active working language, that is your target language. So good command of active working, because here the delivery, here you are going to deliver, you are translating the source text into the target language. So very demanding standard here for top level interpreting and translation. Your level in that particular language should be near to top. Translinguistic communication competence is very much associated with this component. Technical translators should be able to write publishable. They should have the ability to write text that can be published, the, the target language, and have professional writing and editorial skills. So the level, demanded level is so high in this component. Also, literary translators writing styles should equal to the literary writers for whom they are translating. It's very ideal that the translator reach the level where the regional writer has reached. Conference interpreters can make speeches at a language quality level expected from the personality they interpret, like diplomats, scientists, politicians, artists, intellectuals. They have this ability to deliver the speeches with the language, level of that language, and the vocabulary used by the original speaker. And this is not that the native speakers, they can say that we have good command of active working language. So it is beyond that. It is more than that, that the native speakers, let's suppose my my active language is Urdu. So knowing Urdu, because I have studied Urdu in schools and colleges and so on, and I have read some books in Urdu, is not enough. So I need to read lot about the language structure of the language structure, and also I need to read a lot about the poetry, if I'm right, if I'm translating in the area of poetry, and if I'm translating in the area of scientific terminology, and so on and so forth. So it is not the language level which is usually found in among the native speakers. It is more than beyond that level. Number three is sufficient knowledge of the themes and subject matters. you know Variable needs are level of translation, subject matter at hand, working conditions. If you are going to interpret, take this example, if you are going to interpret in the area of medical science, so you should have and the full knowledge, at least near to full knowledge, of the themes and the subject matters that are going to be discussed in that seminar or in that conference. So the level of translation, keeping in view the level of translation, keeping in view the subject matter at hand, and also keeping in view the working condition. In less specialized subjects, of course, with existing thematic knowledge, availability of documents, and human help can tackle more. Usually, what happens that the the organizers, they provide you for the sake of conference, they provide you the papers and the materials uh, related to that event, conference, etc. So you go through that material, of course you prepare yourself with that, you get of course yourself acquainted with the knowledge and of the themes and subject matter of that particular event, of that particular topic for the conference. So it depends what is required, and the level of translation is required. When by level of translation, when I said level of translation, I'm just talking about a few things. I think I will explain if you ask me in the classroom. Okay, with this we can come to the fourth one, is declarative and procedural knowledge about translation. Two terms have been used here in this heading. Declarative means the knowledge about the marketplace, the knowledge about the clients. What are the behavioral norms governing relation between translations and clients, and between translators and other translators? And also knowledge about information sources, tools, clients, specific expectations for each assignment, and so on. These are declarative. We can say there is one aspect which is translating, and there is another circle which is related to the market, to the clients, to the norms, to the ethical codes, to the working conditions of the markets. So whatever is outside the translating is declarative. So the knowledge of declarative knowledge is very essential to prepare a good translator and interpreter. Procedural knowledge is related to the procedures, steps for your work as translator. Means ability to perform actions. As a translator, you know how to manage your time and how to translate, meet your deadlines. As an interpreter, you know, the consecutive interpreter, how to perform your duties. As a simultaneous interpreter, you know how to cope with the difficulties. And then also decision making in the area of translation or interpretation is that what word, what phrase, what sentence I should use for translating certain text. And you should also know the fidelity norms. Fidelity norms are that you are loyal to the text. To what extent, where you can be loyal to the text and where you can compromise. Situations are different in written translation and also in the area of interpreting. Also techniques for ad hoc knowledge acquisition. You need to prepare yourself in a certain area. What are the techniques you need to, for you have only 2 days for the preparation of a conference. So, and of course prior to that you didn't do work in that area, so you need to learn the techniques to get that ad hoc knowledge to prepare yourself for that uh, uh, event. Procedure knowledge, language enhancement. You need to enhance your language and of course maintain yourself in that area. How to solve your problem, note taking, consecutive interpreting, mastery of modern translation technology, everything that is related to translating or interpreting. Maybe specialized forms of translation such as if you are doing web translation, or you are doing audiovisual translation where subtitling or dubbing and voiceover, etc., are done. So what else they need? This is with along with these four components, basic components of translation competence. What else they need? The intellectual criteria and personality features. Although these findings are not research based, again we are coming back to the point of aptitude. The intellectual criteria and personality features. Of course, for some areas, these things are very important. These are mentioned but not determined scientifically, as I said. Sometimes they are seen as prerequisite for admission, but not directly addressed by training. Training should improve the subject's capacity to use them more. Of course, this is done. We have discussed before. I want to give my in my opinion. The intellectual criteria or the aptitude, it has very important role, but this does not justify non-existence of translation education or translation pedagogy or training, let's say. Okay, point number 3 in this lecture is the diversity of translation requirements. uh, the requirements are diversified. We have, if you remember, in point number here, we were discussing the spectrum. So if the spectrum of translation and translator work is such, huge, from 0 to 1,000, and we have steps in between. So the diversity of training requirements is also very diversified requirements. Expert in the field of human activity, you have good semantic and linguistic knowledge, but lack translation or editorial skill. There are people who are excellent in all the things, but in one aspect, maybe they are lacking behind in declarative aspect of translation component. They are language teachers who do not have much general specialized knowledge, so they need that training in that area. They are first year university students, fresh graduates. So hence variety of training program. There can be variety of training program, short term and long, full time and part time, student oriented and professional oriented. So the keeping in view the requirements of the trainees, require need of the trainees, what they need. There could be, many models for providing translation training. Although the writer of this book has given us two types of formal training program. One, of course, is initial training program for outcome newcomers. The I think I don't want to go into the details what have been written on these slides. Take the example of our BS translation interpretation program. Exactly this one. This is 4 year in other countries. In some countries, 3 to 2 year. But this is, for the fresh entrants, those who are coming with the two languages or maybe one language, and then they learn the second language, and then they enter into the area of translating, and then they go through a rigorous training and pedagogy, and then after completing their degree they become professional translators or professional interpreters. So in this under this category, initial training programs for newcomers, we can say between 2 to 4 years or 5 years. In our case, 5 years, because 1 year is meant for language learning. So everything is that there are example. FTI Geneva is offering also shorter program like 6 months to 1 year program. I don't think that the 6 months to 1 year program can be included into initial training program for newcomer. This is my personal opinion. Given the experience that I have here in this in the Department of Translation in International Islamic University. But the short program, the conversion courses or further training or continuing education, we can call them the short courses. And we have also model here in the department. We have a certificate short course in the certificate professional translating and interpreting 3 months, and also a diploma for the 6 months. Many people come to the profession from other fields and activities. I think I have touched this aspect. In the short courses, the focus always remain on certain smaller areas where the students and the learners need training, not the overall training, not all the aspects or most of the aspects of translation training. As you can see here, there are self-taught professionals opt for further training in some basic technical skills. Maybe there are people who have spent 20 years in the area of translating, but they don't know about translation technology. So they want to enhance their skills in the area of translation technology. What are the softwares available? What are the electronic dictionaries, digital dictionaries are available, or what other programs are available, databases are available, or terminology databases are available, and so on and so forth. So they need training, partial training in that area. The rest, they are excellent. So these short courses are usually meant for filling the gaps, and for, of course, teaching translation competence uh, in a partial way. So with this, we, the conversion course, and there is a caution. The course design should differ in both content, of course, and this is quite logical. You cannot design that course the way you are designing the full time initial training courses like BS, T&I, or MS Translation Studies. So the content and approach in teaching, approach in the delivery, approach in the assessment, everything. And customized courses for particular subcomponents of translation competence, and short courses, full coverage of the whole range of the knowledge and skills, all components. I think because things are very, in my view, things are very easy here in this part. And if you better ask me questions in the classroom, because I don't want to spend more time here in these things. But the basic, as I said, keep in your mind two things. One, degree programs, where, as I said, 2 to 5 year programs, and other short courses, we can call them short courses or short training workshops, maybe between 1 week training workshop to 6 month short course, because they take care of partial needs of the learners. And here the the focus is on the comprehensive need or training in a comprehensive training is provided to the learners. Okay, with this, the need for optimization formal translator training. Why? First of all, optimization means full utilization of the resources. Full utilization of the resources. And optimization in short program is not a problem, of course. The short program, not too long, so you can manage the time. But the question of optimization in degree program, initial training, longer programs, there are. Then when we say the optimization, basically we are talking about two things: time and money. We need to optimize, fully utilize the time allocated for this, because time is also money, and also the money that is paid for that purpose. So if we are faced with this question, we have three options only. There should be no training, there should be no education in the area of translation, so there should be no translation pedagogy, one option. The second option is formal training, as we have discussed. Two models are there: long term and then in-house on the job training. So we have these three options to optimize these resources committed for translation training. As for the no training option is concerned, the author's opinion is that the weaker option than the other two. I would like to have a discussion on that in the classroom. Provides no outside guidance to the beginner, of course. Nothing is provided, no training, no guidance. Be deprived, it will deprive of good advice, and of course fall into bad habits. As we have discussed earlier, there are people who are translators, known translators, but they have developed certain bad habits because they didn't get formal training. So uh, in the view of this the writer of this book is that no training is not a good option. As for the formal, now we have two options left with us: formal training versus in-house on-the-job training. Formal training versus in-house on-the-job training. I think what is in-house on-the-job training? Formal training is obviously is very much clear. Where the students come, they register, they spend semesters, studies, go through the rigorous training, and then get the degree. In-house on-the-job training is that the companies, agencies working in the area of translation or interpretation, they hire the graduates, they hire the translators, bilinguals, and they give them a job, temporary job in the beginning under training, and they work under the supervision of experienced translators. So this is one model, and the other is, of course, is the formal training. Both options involve progress under supervision, of course. Here the teachers are supervising, and here the professional translators are supervising. In formal training, theoretically closer supervision by the qualified teachers. Of course, every week students have classes, and the teachers are observing, supervising, monitoring the progress of the students. But in real life, the quality of supervision is not always better in formal training, and there are reasons. Because the when translation teachers are professionals who teach part time, they don't have much time that for the students, because they have a lot of work in the translating. So they will allocate their time, they will devote their time in the area of translating, because they get huge money for translating documents and books and so on, as compared to teaching a course. Of course, we know this because we are facing this problem. uh, so the quality of supervision or the quality of monitoring would be different if the teachers, translation teachers, are professional translators coming from the market. Such professional translators generally not being trained for teaching and do not necessarily have, this is another aspect. On one side, they will prefer their for translating work because they are getting more money from that source. On the other side, they are not professional trainers, teachers, or pedagogues. Okay, when trainers are full-time academic instructors like us, rather than the professional translators, they may not be they may be out of touch with updated professional reality and the market, what is happening in the market. So their work would become a superficial work. They will select text that have been just selected randomly from different sources and given to the students, and of course they will be out of touch, or they will not be updated with what is actually uh, being translated in the market nowadays. In the in-house option, supervisors are generally not trained teachers either, but they are familiar with the market as it is, and as it evolves, changes. So they cope with the changes also that are taking place in the market. They supervise the trainees' translation of texts which are to be handed over to the clients. This point is very important. If the translator is translating a text, student as a student, and he knows that I'm just translating for the sake of learning. I will translate, my teacher will check, and then it will go nowhere. But if a translator is translating a text, which is, of course, which is for the sake of earning money, and the text, translated text, is shall be handed over to the client, I think the considerations, the quality of time spent on the work is totally different. So if in case of in-house option, the supervisor, they also supervise the learners and the trainees with full attention, because they are much concerned with the work with the translated text, because if they cannot, of course, compromise on the quality of work. So they are therefore likely to have a stronger sense of professional responsibility towards such texts and supervise this. As I said earlier, the supervisor to trainee ratio is it's very important. In the classroom, usually, a teacher has 20, 15, or more than 20 students. So the teacher cannot give individual attention to every student. But in the in-house on the job training, the supervisors usually have one to two or three supervisee or trainees, so can allocate much time, full attention on their working. And knowledge acquired in in-house is totally relevant to the market, of course, and while knowledge acquired in translation schools may be less, because usually what happens in the translation departments and schools and the faculties, that the teachers, they give a lot of theoretical knowledge also, which may or may not be relevant to the current market. But in-house on the job training, because the agencies, because the companies, they are very much related to the market, so they are updated. So whatever they are doing is very much relevant to the market. um, and also the average amount of relevant work done per unit of training time is smaller in formal training than in the in-house option. Of course, the volume of work is usually more than the volume of work done inside the classroom. Financial aspects in formal and in-house training. Of course, in the formal training, the students have to pay, of course, a fee, and to pay huge money, and of course the living expenses without doing anything for the period of 2 to 5 years. But on the job training, they can start earning money while learning their trade. Big difference for adult candidates. If the candidates are adults and they have families, and they are also looking after their families, of course they cannot spare this much time or money to get the formal training. Okay, there's a note by the author of this book: general consideration based on informal exchanges with the colleagues, and feel this opinion that is expressed here is based on the general consideration based on informal exchanges with the colleagues and the field observation, not claims based on systematic empirical studies. The writer is so humble, is so polite in his presentation, that although he is saying obvious things, but then he is also recording the fact here. Oh, the process oriented approach in translator. We shall discuss this again, uh, maybe after 3 to 4 more lectures. We will come back to these approaches for translator training. But here we need to know, because the point is related to the need for optimization in formal translator training. And in this context, the author has included this process oriented approach. So there are basically two things. We need to understand the process oriented approach, but to understand the process oriented approach, we need to understand the product oriented approach in translation training. The product oriented approach focuses on what? The thing. What is the product in translation? Is translations or interpretations? Interpretations are translations at word level, sentence level, structure, grammar, errors, paragraphs level, controlled by the teachers, and it's prescriptive. It is like just providing a fish to the student. I think let's make it simple. The product oriented approach in translation is that when the students translate a text and they show this translation to the teachers correct it and indicate to the mistakes, and sometimes tells the solutions for that mistakes for each translation or for all the translations. because the focus of the teacher here is on the product. If the student is translating a sentence and making a mistake, the role of the teacher becomes like this: this is incorrect, this is correct. This is what product oriented approach. But the process of oriented approach focuses on not on what, focuses on how to do good, correct translation. I hope you understand what is a good translation. Correct translation is product oriented approach. But how to reach, how to learn the phases through which one can reach to the correct and a good translation is process oriented approach. It is experiential learning. It is interactive and collaborative. It is student centered. Identifies problems in the process followed by the students. Methodological guidance is given on how to go about translating. Near to descriptive fishing. In the process oriented approach, fishing is taught and fish is not given. Students are told how to fish, not given a fish. So for example, in the process oriented approach, teachers would tell this is the text to be translated. How to translate will explain the phases for translation. For example, read the text, original text, this much time, comprehension phases, how to understand the original text, comprehension phases, translation phases, translate this sentence wise, revision, do it yourself. And when individual translation is done, teacher can, this is just one example, a teacher can constitute groups, ask the students to make groups, and now revise the translation that you have done, mutually exchanging the views, using the dictionaries, and creating a discussion why I am translating this in this way, why your translation is not correct, and give you the evidences from the dictionaries, from other sources. And then the group, they come to the in front of the class of one member of the group, and they present their final translation after discussion, after revision, and so on and so forth. So now what is the teacher is doing in this process oriented approach is teaching, is making the learners to grasp the steps for the correct translation. So the process oriented approach is like that. Is of course the teacher diagnoses the problems. The problems could be individual, could be related to all, so the teaching method would be totally different in this case. And advantages, what are the advantages of process oriented approach? Is suitable for early stages of translation training. The suggestion here is that the process oriented approach is very effective in the early stages of translator training. Students are likely to learn to select and implement translation strategies, steps, phases, methods. Teachers' time on the reasons for errors or good choices in the translation rather than on specific words or language structures. Through this approach, the students, they also become confident because they know we did it, they know we corrected it, they know we recognized our own mistakes. So by virtue of this, the biggest benefit is that they attain a confidence. Oh, this is the way how to solve the problem, this is the way how to reach a correct translation. Flexibility. Teachers does not insist on specific words or phrases. This can be done at later stage. In the beginning, of course, teacher is just giving a freedom to the students to, of course, select words. They may not be correct 100%, but at that stage, because the focus is on the process, phases, and steps, not on the product, correct translation. So the teacher is flexible. uh, this is very important that the process oriented approach improves the product as well, but it needs little more time, of course. There are a lot of other benefits associated to the process oriented approach that we can discuss when we meet in the classroom. The next reading assignment for you people is the remaining part of the chapter, which is point number 6 to 10, except point number 9, because we are not going to discuss point number 9, where the author is giving the outline of the whole book, because we are not going to read the whole book. Not the whole book is included in this course. We have taken only 2 chapters from this book, but as I said, the book is very beneficial for the researchers or the future teachers in the area of translation pedagogy. Thank you very much. See you with the new lecture tomorrow, inshallah.